They say time folds over itself when you're not looking. One moment, you're holding a newborn to your chest, and the next you're sitting across from a man with your eyes, your smile, and a quiet strength you've only ever seen in your dreams. That man is Christian, my son. And this is our story. I was 21 when I married his father, Daniel. Older than me, wealthier, a man who wore confidence like cologne. But what I thought was charm revealed itself, in time, as control. Harsh words spoken like law, anger that flared without warning. It started small, disapproval disguised as guidance, criticism cloaked in concern. But it grew. One night, I watched him slam his fist into the wall near Christian's crib when I wouldn't stop crying. That was the night I knew I had to go. I left with nothing but a duffel bag and my baby boy. We lived in a one-bedroom apartment for most of Christian's childhood. I worked nights as a waitress, mornings as a receptionist, and when I wasn't working, I was with him, reading to him, feeding him, holding him close. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and I wrapped that bond around us like armor. I was his mother. I was his home. He grew up thoughtful, observant. Even as a child, Christian noticed the world in ways that made me ache. At 5, he would take my hand while we walked to the bus stop and say things like, "Don't worry, Mama. I'll always take care of you." And he meant it. By the time he was a teenager, he had become the kind of boy teachers adored and other boys admired, quietly confident, steady like an anchor. He stayed in on Friday nights when he knew I was tired, watched documentaries instead of going to parties, and cooked me dinner on my birthday with a candle stuck in a grilled cheese sandwich. "Your favorite," he'd said, grinning. People always asked why I never dated after the divorce. My answer was always the same. I was raising a son. He was my reason, my rhythm. And to be honest, I didn't miss it. The idea of inviting another man into our sanctuary seemed absurd. I didn't need love. I had Christian. I didn't say that out loud, of course. But it lived in my chest like a quiet truth. The years passed. He went off to college, called me every Sunday without fail, and texted me daily just to say, "You okay?" After graduation, he surprised me by moving back to California instead of staying on the East Coast where jobs were plentiful and opportunities glittered. "The best job I'll ever have is being your son," he told me one evening over dinner. I laughed, touched his cheek, and said, "That's sweet. But you don't owe me anything, Christian." He looked me straight in the eye. "Maybe not, but I still want to give back." And he did. A few months after his 24th birthday, he surprised me with something I never saw coming. "You're taking a weekend off," he announced, dropping a folded itinerary on the kitchen counter. "What is this?" I asked, unfolding the paper. "A yacht. Champagne. Strawberries dipped in chocolate. Seafood. And a mother who deserves to feel like a queen." My eyes filled before I could stop them. "You planned all this?" He nodded, smiling. "For everything you've done for me." I didn't know what to say. I touched the paper like it might dissolve. He leaned in, brushing a stray curl from my face. "Just say yes." So I did. We boarded the yacht on a bright Friday morning. The sky was a canvas of blue stretched wide, the water shimmering like glass. I stood barefoot on the deck as the boat pulled away from the dock, my heart full in ways I hadn't felt in years. There was music playing softly, instrumental jazz, the kind I used to hum when Christian was a baby. He poured champagne into 2 flutes and handed me one, his eyes crinkling at the edges. "To you, Mom?" "To us," I replied, touching my glass to his. We sat side by side as the boat glided through the water, the breeze tugging at our clothes. He had ordered everything I loved: oysters, seared scallops, crisp white wine, and strawberries dipped in dark chocolate. Everything was perfect, thoughtful, luxurious in a way that made me feel guilty, until I saw the way he watched me, like he wanted me to believe I deserved it. And for the first time in a long time, I almost did. That evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, Christian wrapped a light shawl around my shoulders. His fingers lingered a second too long, and I turned to thank him, catching his gaze, steady, unreadable, something unspoken flickering behind it. Something shifted in that moment. Not loud, Not obvious, but something. And I felt it. A pulse of heat. A flutter of confusion. I looked away. We sat in silence, watching the sea wrap itself in darkness, and for the first time since Christian was born, I felt something I couldn't name. Something I didn't dare. The first night on the yacht passed in a kind of dreamlike stillness. Christian set the tone, lighting candles on the deck, playing soft music through a hidden speaker system, and bringing out a bottle of Pinot Noir he had researched just for the occasion. "Pairs perfectly with chocolate," he said with a wink, setting down a tray of hand-dipped strawberries he'd prepared himself. He had thought of everything, right down to the fine throw blanket he tucked over my legs when the ocean breeze turned cool. "It's too much," I told him, but not like I meant it. Something in me was too moved to be anything but grateful. He shrugged, sitting beside me. "You never ask for anything. I wanted to give you something that felt like the world." I smiled, sipping the wine slowly. "It does." We talked for hours under the stars, about his job, about the books I'd started but never finished, about old family vacations to Big Sur, and the year we'd tried camping and ended up soaked in a storm. We laughed until our stomachs hurt, until tears ran down our cheeks from nothing more than the sheer joy of remembering. But when the laughter died, the quiet between us wasn't empty. It was thick, charged with something that I didn't know how to place. Christian's leg brushed against mine, just a casual touch, one of 100 over the years. But I felt it this time, really felt it, like his warmth had pressed into my skin and stayed there. He leaned his head back, exhaling softly. "You know," he said, his voice low, "this is the first time I've seen you like this in, I don't even know how long." "Like what?" I asked. "Relaxed. At peace." He turned his head to look at me. "Beautiful." I laughed, startled. "Christian." He didn't flinch. "You are." The wine buzzed in my veins, but his words echoed louder than anything alcohol could explain. I looked at him carefully, trying to decide if it was just a son's affection or something else entirely. Something beginning to blur the lines. "No," I told myself. "You're tired. You're imagining it." The next day brought a calm, so serene I barely spoke until noon. We took the boat farther out, dropped anchor in a cove where the cliffs folded around us like protective arms. The water was turquoise, clear enough to see fish darting beneath the surface. Christian dove in first, calling up to me to join him. I hesitated, then jumped, like I had when he was 10, and dared me off the pier in Monterey. We swam like children, weightless and laughing, racing to the ladder, splashing and daring. But something shifted again when we climbed back aboard, soaked and breathless. His hands brushed mine as we toweled off. He looked at me, and for a second, it felt like he wasn't seeing his mother, just a woman. Later, I sat on the deck alone, drying in the sun while he prepared a light lunch. My mind wandered, unsettled by how keenly aware I'd become of his presence. It wasn't that he'd changed. It was that I had started noticing. Noticing the way he smiled when he thought I wasn't looking. The way he poured wine with effortless grace. The way he watched me as though seeing me anew. That night, we didn't talk as much. We ate a quiet dinner by lantern light and listened to the waves. At one point, he reached across the table to touch my hand, just for a second, as he told a story from college. I didn't pull away, but I didn't lean in either. I wasn't ready. After dinner, we stood at the rail watching the moon rise. It painted the sea in a silver ribbon, turning everything to light and shadow. Christian moved closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do you ever think maybe we only get one real soulmate? And sometimes they show up in ways we don't expect." My heart caught in my chest. "Christian," I said, but I didn't know what else to say. He turned to face me, so close I could feel his breath on my cheek. "I don't mean anything bad," he said softly, searching my face. "It's just you've been everything to me. My mother, my friend, my guide. And now I look at you, and I see this woman. And I don't know what to do with what I feel." A silence settled between us. Heavy, fragile. I didn't speak. I couldn't. And yet, something in me cracked open. He leaned in, not all the way, but enough that his forehead touched mine, the most tender of gestures. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I shouldn't have said that." "No," I said, my voice tight. "No, it's okay." He stepped back then, giving me space, retreating into himself. But the current had changed. Something unspoken had passed between us, and it wouldn't go away. The third morning on the yacht began with silence, too quiet for comfort, too full for peace. Christian was already on the deck when I woke, his back to me as he leaned on the railing, coffee mug in hand. The light was soft and pink over the horizon, making the water look like melted copper. He didn't turn around when I stepped out, just lifted the mug in greeting. "Morning," he said. I nodded, wrapping the shawl tighter around my shoulders. "Did you sleep?" He smiled faintly. "Enough." We didn't talk about what he'd said the night before. About soulmates. About the way he looked at me like I was someone new. But it was there, between us, invisible and pressing. A closeness that didn't belong. A pull neither of us understood. After breakfast, we anchored again in a quiet inlet. I tried to distract myself by reading, but the words blurred on the page. Christian was stretched out in the sun nearby, shirtless, his skin glowing from salt and light. He caught me glancing once, just once, and held my gaze for a moment too long. I dropped my eyes and turned the page I hadn't read. Later, as the heat of the afternoon softened, he brought out dessert, more strawberries, this time drizzled in dark chocolate, cooled in crushed ice. "Your favorite," he said, placing the bowl beside me. I smiled, but it felt unsure. "You remember everything." He shrugged. "You never forget what matters." He sat close, closer than necessary. Our arms touched lightly where we sat side by side, and neither of us moved. We ate in silence. One strawberry, then another, until I turned to look at him, and he turned too, and our faces were inches apart. I didn't mean to lean forward. I didn't mean for my hand to brush his cheek. But it happened. His eyes dropped to my mouth for the briefest second, and when I opened my lips to speak, anything at all, he kissed me. Soft. Uncertain. Like a man trying a language he didn't know how to speak. I froze. Time stopped. Everything else fell away. And I kissed him back. Just once. Then I stood up, heart pounding, and walked away without a word. I spent the rest of the afternoon in the cabin, unable to face the ocean or the sun, or him. My reflection in the porthole window looked unfamiliar, like someone I didn't know. What had I done? What had we become? The door creaked open hours later. I didn't turn. "I'm sorry," he said behind me. "That wasn't fair." I shook my head slowly. "No, it wasn't." "But—" He waited. "I didn't stop you." He stepped closer, cautious. "I know." We stood like that for a long time, not touching, barely breathing. When I finally turned to face him, his expression nearly broke me. He looked like he was bracing for rejection. Or worse, disgust. But I couldn't give him that. Because it wasn't what I felt. I crossed the room slowly, until we stood almost chest to chest. "I don't know what this is," I said. "But I know it's real." His voice was rough. "Then tell me it's okay to feel it." I couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I reached for him, wrapping my arms around his waist and pulling him to me. He held me like I was something precious, familiar, sacred. We didn't speak. We didn't kiss again. But we held each other in a silence so deep, so desperate, it said more than words ever could. That night, we pretended again. At dinner, we laughed too loud. We drank too much champagne. We acted like nothing had changed, like we hadn't crossed a line we could never uncross. But when we said goodnight, our fingers lingered longer than necessary. And when I lay in bed, I could still taste the strawberry and the salt of his lips. I thought I could leave the kiss in the past, lock it away with the excuses I'd made for 100 other things in my life. But some moments don't allow you to pretend they never happened. They become a presence in the room, in the air, in the way you breathe beside someone you've always loved, but never like this. The next day, Christian didn't mention it. He made breakfast, handed me coffee, and gave me a gentle smile, but his eyes held something else. A storm behind a window. Waiting. I played along. I asked him about work, his plans for fall. I nodded. I laughed. But every time his hand brushed mine, passing the plate, setting down a fork, I flinched. Not out of fear, but recognition. We had crossed into something vast. Something too deep for casual words. In the afternoon, we moved slowly along the coast, the yacht drifting near shore. The breeze was light, teasing strands of my hair across my face. I leaned against the railing, watching the sunlight dance on the waves. Christian came up behind me, close but not touching. "Do you regret it?" he asked, voice barely audible above the surf. The question lodged in my throat. "No," I whispered. "Do you?" He didn't answer. Not at first. When he did, it was a breath, not a word.
"No."
He stood beside me for a long time, the silence heavy between us, like wet sails on still water. When I finally turned toward him, the truth was right there in his face, in the way he looked at me with reverence and confusion and want. He reached up slowly, his fingertips brushing my cheek. I didn't move. I didn't stop him. This time, when he kissed me, it wasn't shy. It was quiet and deep and slow, like he had been holding the moment back his whole life. His hands slid to the curve of my waist, and I let mine rest on his chest, feeling the race of his heart under my palm. When we pulled apart, I didn't speak. I couldn't. Instead, I stepped into him, burying my face in his shoulder, and he wrapped his arms around me. It wasn't passion that moved us. It was something older, something made of all the years, all the nights he sat by my side while I read to him, all the mornings I packed his lunch with a handwritten note, all the years he looked at me with love, and now with something else layered beneath.
We didn't make sense of it that night.
We just existed in it. We danced, slowly, barefoot, on the deck under the stars. The music was soft, coming from the little speaker tucked near the cabin door. His hand in mine, his palm on my back,
My cheek against his chest.
When he held me that night, we didn't call it anything. But we both knew. We had crossed a threshold. The next morning, when we docked back in the marina, the spell broke. The wind felt sharper. The air too real. We said little as we packed. In the car on the drive home, I watched the road and pretended to listen to the radio. He glanced at me now and then but didn't speak. The tension had shifted. It wasn't uncertainty anymore. It was fear. Fear of what it meant. What we might have become. That night, we sat in the living room of our home, the same space where I once helped him with math homework, where he once surprised me with a Mother's Day breakfast tray he could barely carry. He sat across from me, elbows on knees, head lowered. "I don't know how to stop feeling this," he said quietly. "I don't think you're supposed to," I said. He looked up, startled. "I've tried to reason it away," I continued. Tried to call it confusion, emotion, champagne. "But Christian," I shook my head. "I've never felt more seen than when I'm with you." He nodded slowly, like he'd been waiting to hear those words. "But we can't say it," I added. "Not to anyone. Maybe not even to each other." He stood then, crossed the room, and knelt before me. "Then don't say anything," he whispered, lifting my hand. "Just let me stay close." And I let him. I didn't name it. I didn't ask where it was going. But as his head rested in my lap and my fingers brushed his hair, like they had when he was small, though nothing about the moment was the same, I felt it again. Not regret. Not shame. Just the impossible weight of forbidden gratitude. And a love that had changed shape.